A botched burglary with tragic consequences.
I just shot 2 guys.
4 friends, Jose, Anthony, Blake, and Danzel, broke into a house when they thought no one was home. Levi, another friend, had cold feet about the whole plan and stayed behind.
They broke into my house. I'm holding a gun on the people right now.
The startled homeowner, fearing for his own safety, had shot Blake Lehman in the back of the leg. He survived. But cowering in a closet, Danzel Johnson was shot in the chest. He died at the scene. Anthony and Jose ran and were later caught. Most in the community of Elkhart, Indiana, expected the boys would be charged with burglary. They weren't. They were charged with felony murder. A person can be charged with felony murder if someone dies during or shortly after the commission of a felony, like a burglary, whether the death was intentional or accidental. The case of the Elkhart 4 divided this town, pitting neighbor against neighbor.
There's a lot of chaos in the city. It was divided.
Defense attorney Vincent Campiti was one of those who felt the felony murder charge was excessive.
From the beginning of my looking at the case, the absurdity of it was evident. How can a prosecutor charge these boys with killing one of their friends, a co-defendant, who also broke into the home? How's that happen?
For these 4, it was an undeniable reality based on the law.
The difference, though, with this case was these boys were juveniles, operating with juvenile brains, maybe a little bit different than an adult. They took steps to make sure that the house was empty. They had gone to several other homes, knocked on doors. None of them were armed. We believe that the evidence will show that it wasn't foreseeable that the breaking and entering into this particular home would or could lead to one of them being injured or killed. So that was basically the focus of the defense.
But instead of taking his chances at a trial in front of a jury, Jose Quiros took a plea deal. In exchange for a guilty plea, he would get 45 years. Now it was the Elkhart 3 facing a murder trial together. Their request to be tried separately was denied. The trial, from jury selection to the verdict, lasted only 4 days.
On the 4th day, the jury went out for deliberation. They could not leave until they came up with the verdict.
Around 10 p.m., both the prosecution and the defense requested that the court send the jury home, etc., come back and deliberate in the morning. The court chose not to do so. The jury then, about 2 hours later, came back with a verdict of guilty of felony murder.
When they read the verdict, everyone in the courtroom, families, friends, they all just busted out crying, yelling. I went into shock.
We weren't expecting it. I should have had myself prepared for the worst. We always felt, yeah, they did a crime and they should be punished for the crime they did. That was not murder.
Their sentences? Anthony and Blake each received 55 years. Levi, who never even stepped foot in the house, received 50 years.
Knowing that my son was going to spend that 50 years, possibly in prison, I would not have been alive to see him out. It was just heartbreaking.
Hearing that was just, a pain. I mean, an instant chest pain, 55 years. I mean, that to me was my son's life.
With that, they were whisked off to start serving their time at Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison. But Angie and the others were not giving up. The fight was far from over.
I knew right from the beginning that I would fight and do whatever I had to do to fight it, and that's what I did.
The defense first took the case to the Court of Appeals, where it was decided the sentences were inappropriate. They were reduced by 10 years. Next stop, the highest court in the state, the Supreme Court of Indiana.
Ultimately, about 6 months later, we received their decision overturning the felony murder convictions. We were elated.
We won at the Supreme Court. That's a big deal and very happy moment.
The Supreme Court ultimately reversed the convictions, citing a lack of dangerously violent and threatening conduct. They went on to say the state did not follow common practice and file an additional count of burglary against the defendants. It chose instead to file a single count of felony murder in the perpetration of a burglary.
I got to tell Blake and Levi face to face that there was overturned. They have an opportunity to get out and still go to school and have kids and a family, and I'm just so happy for them.
Last month, the case was back in Elkhart County for the new sentences to be handed down. This time for a Class B felony charge with a possible sentence of up to 20 years. Anthony and Blake each got 10 years, and Levi got 9. Because of time served and other earned credits, Blake is expected to be released this summer, and Anthony in May of 2018. What about Levi?
Well, today, the first of the Elkhart 4 released from prison.
How's it feel to be out now?
It feels great. I'm just ready to get home and just get my life together.
So Levi was home, and the others would soon follow. But shockingly, the question of Jose Quiros' fate still lingered. Because of his plea deal, he was ineligible to receive the shorter sentence on appeal for burglary, like his Elkhart brothers. Then, a month later, he got some life-changing news.
I just left court last week and it still hasn't kicked in yet. It makes me happy. It makes me feel good about myself. Knowing that none of us did give up and we just kept our faith and kept our hope up, and I mean, it all paid off.
In a post-conviction relief hearing, Jose had his conviction changed to a charge of burglary and his sentence reduced to 10 years in prison. Freedom is now within reach for Anthony, Blake, and Jose, who have all spent more than 3 years behind bars. They can't wait for the day they get to leave the prison walls behind and start life anew.
I'm happy. I'm happy for all of them. I'm happy we're finally here. I'm happy it's almost finally over, and everybody can move on with their lives.
Well, it was a controversial sentence, to say the least, Andrea. Can I ask you about the homeowner here who fired the fatal shot?
Matt, that man, Rodney Scott, was never charged with any crime at all. Prosecutors truly believe he was trying to save his life and acted in self-defense.
Well, there's many people who would say you're entitled to defend yourself in your own home. Thank you, Andrea.
Right.
Here's a look at what else is still ahead on Crime Watch Daily.